There's a lot of things going on these days that can be all sorts of distractions to life. And one thing that I might find distracting in life occurs at about 8 o'clock tonight when the Oilers play their next game. And I know there's others here who are watching that. And as I watch the playoffs, one of the things that, not just this year, but I've certainly noticed it this year that I find remarkable in an NHL game is watching the goaltenders. Because a goaltender does something wrong. And you know, everybody notices it. And particularly if you're on the visiting team, all of a sudden you make a mistake and thousands of people are yelling at you, cheering for the other team. And it gets analyzed. And I gotta be honest with you, if I knew thousands of people were watching my mistakes and talking about it, that's all I can focus on. What about you? Do you think if everything went wrong, you could stay focused on what you need to focus on? I mean, even with goaltenders, I mean, they put on this flashing red light when you make a mistake. I mean, everybody knows your mistake. It's hard to stay focused sometimes, to stay on task. And I know for me, there are many times that I do something wrong or somebody around me does something wrong, and it kind of captures my attention for a long time. And I know that that's not just true for me, because I've talked to people about this often. We get distracted very easily in life. We're right now on Sunday mornings looking at a series of Psalms that are clustered together from Psalm 120 to 134. They're clustered together for providing songs to focus the people of God on a task that is dangerous, that's hard, but is critical. They're traveling for days, possibly, going through difficult circumstances to get to the city of Jerusalem, to get to the place where God has called them together to worship. And in these Psalms, in this section of Psalms, there's like little groupings within each one. There's the first one, Psalm 120, was a complaint, or maybe a better way of saying it is the person who's writing it is expressing what is really going on in the world around them, what's really going on in their lives. And it is not an easy situation. They're expressing what's hard, and yet, even though everything's hard, they're making a deliberate decision to follow God. The second one was all about the wisdom that is found when we follow God above what is common sense, above what feels natural and logical. And the third was a simple expression of honesty, that things may not always be going the way that I think they should, but I know, God, that you are at work. And this becomes a pattern throughout this little section of the Psalms, that one is an expression of here's how the world really is, the second is here's how God really is, and the third is just simple praise. So we're going to start that process of looking at this triad, to use a fancy word, of Psalms over again. And Psalm 123 becomes the beginning of a new section, so it's an expression of honesty. You know what? There's problems in life. There are things that occur that bring about anxiety. There are things that drive me crazy. There are people situations. And do I let those things hold my attention? Or do I see the King? What do I see more? The things in the world that drive me crazy, or the glory that is before me? And this psalm is written, I'm calling you on this big journey. You're going to be successful in this journey. You got to be looking in the right direction. These traveling psalms, these psalms about heading to Jerusalem, God's holy city, are a proclamation that the journey is worth it. Find your full satisfaction, your hope, your love, and a glorious Father. And do not let anything pull your attention away from what he is trying to accomplish. Do not live in anxiety. Do not take the easy way, but instead look to the King. So we come to Psalm 123. And Ron read this already. You can follow along in your Bibles. Got up on the screen and starts off with this great proclamation. To you, I lift my eyes. Oh, you who are enthroned in the heavens. There's a common pattern in the Christian life, and I've run across it many times, that when somebody comes to faith and they're new in this journey of faith, they're new in believing in Jesus, it's often a time in which it seems that God, to them at least, seems closest, where they're the most confident in faith and feeling the most secure in God. There's a parable that Jesus tells of a sower goes out and puts a seed in the ground, and everything starts to grow. Some ends up being in very shallow soil. Others grows and weeds come up and choke it. Do you know what he's really saying? Everything starts good, but eventually life tends to catch up with things. Eventually, something occurs in everybody's life that causes a great distraction. And death occurs when the hard work of the journey of faith really starts. There's hard moments when we find out that God is bigger than we can imagine. And it's only discovered as we go through the struggles of life. God is king. Sometimes in some of the language we use these days, it's become popular, we make God kind of our pal. Kind of a buddy. Now he's a friend. John 15, very clear. No greater love exists than this. He's talking to his disciples. He's about to go to the cross, and he says, no greater love than this exists, that somebody is willing to sacrifice, even to the point of laying down their life for their friends. He uses that word, friends. Sounds wonderful. He looks at them. You can just picture Jesus in front of the 12 disciples looking at them. You are my friends. What a great moment, what a great statement. You are my friends. But we have to finish the sentence. You are my friends if you do what I command. He's king. He is our friend. This is a serious, life-changing relationship. One that will continually challenge our thinking, our attitudes, our actions, and if we ever get comfortable And God is not challenging us and trying to change what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're meditating on, how we're talking. If God isn't doing those things, there's something wrong with the relationship from my point of view. I read one author this week who described this relationship, looking at Psalm 123, verse 1, saying, He is the heaven-dwelling one. And the idea that He's in heaven is not about distance. It's not about so much about how far away He is or something like that. There's been times in history where that has come up. By the time they were getting late in writing the New Testament, by the time Paul's getting to his later letters, and when John is writing his letters and his gospel, they're really writing to fight a heresy that had come up. It was called Gnosticism. Name doesn't matter a whole lot. But they were people who thought they were smarter than everybody else. And they taught God. He's way, way out there in the distant of space. And somehow we got to figure ways to get his attention and get close to him. He's distant, distant, distant. In the 1700s, a philosophy started to come up. It was called rationalism. And it had this idea in it that God was so, he existed, but he was so far away, he played almost no role in my life or your life. He was so distant, he wasn't worried about us. This is not saying God is far away. This is a way of framing the relationship between humanity and God. To you, I lift my heavens, my eyes, you who are enthroned in the heavens. The psalmist is writing this. He's not an astronomer talking about where God is. He's a theologian saying that God is king. And that this relationship is all about him being the one in charge. So often, we can have the wrong attitude. I read something that phrased it well this week that I thought, this does capture the way a lot of people talk to me. And I got to be honest with you, occasionally hits me. He said, sometimes we treat our religion, it's a phrase he used, the author is reading, we treat it almost like you would say our faith, as a bureaucracy, a mysterious bureaucracy, in which every once in a while we need some aid. So we go into the bureaucratic office and we talk to the clerk. This author is reading, put clerk, and then he put a slash instead, or pastor. And we fill out a request for aid, and then we go back home and we wait for God to fulfill what we need. And yet, we know in our heads that God's bigger than this, that He understands my needs better than I do, and He also understands much better than I do how everything in the world is interconnected, how it all works. And He sees the complications of this world. We need to continually discover new depths of God as King, as the almighty sovereign of all. The God who created all. The God who, when the people were put in slavery in Egypt, comes down and becomes the God of the Exodus. And then becomes the God of Mount Sinai, where he gives them a framework for how to relate to him. And then becomes the God of the rest of the Old Testament, who keeps coming and reminding them of himself. And then becomes the God of Calvary, who dies so that we may know that we are loved. And then becomes the God of the resurrection, who brings new life. And to this day is the God of hope, who has promised that humanity is heading towards an ultimate conclusion of his love. We have a God we can trust him. Psalm 121, 2 Psalms before this. If you missed that sermon, you can find it online. It started off, I look to the hills. I lift my eyes up to the hills. We saw that 2 weeks ago, that the hills might be where all sorts of shrines to other gods were. Might be where all the enemies were. It was a place I might lift my eyes to find either an easier solution than going to Jerusalem, or I might find my troubles. Psalm 121, 123, they probably weren't written at the same time. They may not have even been aware of each other when they were written. But they get clumped together. And one, his eyes are on all the problems, on all the things of this world that drive me crazy, all the sin of everybody else, all the sins of my heart. And Psalm 123 now, to you I lift my eye. Totally different focus. I'm not focused on sin, whether it be mine or somebody else. I'm focused on the glory of the God who's enthroned in the heavens. I'm overwhelmed by him and continually learning more of him. In the Chronicles of Narnia books by C.S. Lewis, there's a remarkable line in which, you know the books, that Jesus is portrayed by this lion Aslan, and these children get to know him, and they go through a little period of time where they're separated, and they meet up again. And the one child, Lucy, sees Aslan in her joy, goes running to him, and then cries out, "You're bigger now." And C.S. Lewis added the line at the end, "Every time you grow, you'll discover I grow." That's how Christian life is. It is continually discovering more of how big God is. Everybody's going to get real nervous because we spend most of the time on verse 1. Don't panic. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hands of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God, till he has mercy upon us. This week, we had to run into Fort Saskatchewan real quick and grab some stuff, and we're coming home, and we're on 15, we're still in the part where it's twinned, and we were driving in the right lane behind a large van, and beside us, just kind of catching up slowly, there was a car on our left, and the car in front of us flipped on its signal and started to move to the left lane, and the car that was slowly catching up to us gunned the monitor. They went flying, and practically a crash. You could tell they were trying to get ahead of that vehicle. He had to swing right back into the lane, just missed having an accident, and the guy was running it, just went ahead, immediately cut into the right lane and slowed down to the point everybody had to hit their brakes. Finally, the car in front of us was able to get in the left-hand lane. It was going to make a turn. I was annoyed by that driver. When the other guy moved out of the way, the car that cut everybody off was very visible. And big letters, not on the bumper, but right across the entire back of this car that was driving like a maniac, were the words, "Jesus saves." Zoe looked over at me and said, "This is going to make Sunday sermon, isn't it?" Because I'm going to tell you, my first reaction is, I'm so angry that somebody would be that poor a witness. And it's easy to let what bugs us drive us crazy to the point that it becomes the focus. My eyes are not to be on that driver. My eyes are on someone else. I approach God the right way. These verses kind of give an interesting description of a servant who comes with a request to the master. Now, this is old language. We don't use language like this very much anymore. But it's common in the Bible. It's a servant who comes to the master with a request, and the master's not quite ready to hear it. And so the servant waits. Waits with anticipation. Waits with trust, putting the relationship in the right context. Living in expectation. Not in demanding, but in expectation of the goodness of the master. We can talk to God anytime. This isn't saying we have to wait around for the right moment to talk to God. That's not the point. The point is putting the relationship the right way. And seeing Him as the one who is truly in control. He's compassionate, but He's on the throne. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14, 16. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then, with confidence, draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. It's compassionate, but on the throne. Very beginning of the service, I read from Hebrews chapter 12. A couple chapters after what I just read. Hebrews chapter 11 is a long chapter in which it starts to describe all sorts of people who have been persecuted, who are suffering, who are struggling, and yet live victorious. Despite the fact that everything's going wrong, they live in victory. And then chapter 12 says this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, since we're surrounded by all these people who went through persecution, struggle, hard times, and yet we're still living in the victory of Jesus, yet still found hope, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that sets before us. What are the sins here? If you go through it, it's all the anxieties that we put before Jesus. It's all the times that doubt wins. Let's put them aside. Let's see the victory that Jesus has won. Let us see him in his glory. Verse 2 continues, looking to Jesus. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him endured the cross, went through his own struggles, because he knew there was joy on the other side, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. There's going to be temptation. There's going to be moments of anxiety, struggle, doubt. But what wins? Discouragement? Or Jesus in all of his glory? All that he's done, the incredible beauty of the King upon the throne. This is all about the servant just looking at the master. The servant calling to the king, look after me, because only you can. The chapter ends. Have mercy upon us, O Lord. Have mercy upon us, for we have had more than enough of contempt. Our soul has had more than enough. The scorn of those who are at ease, of the contempt of the proud. This is the actual call that the servant has, the prayer. Mercy being called out. Not anything else. Not anything other than God, look at me properly. There's another psalm, Psalm 94, starts, O Lord, God of vengeance. O God of vengeance, shine forth. It's several chapters, but there's several verses about huge injustice. About him being hurt and vulnerable. And partway through that psalm then it says, understand, O dullest of the peoples, fools, when will you be wise? And then God goes on to explain that that's us. The people are calling out for justice because we aren't seeing the long picture. We don't live long enough to see the full glories of God. God's bigger than our lifetime. And in verse 12, blessed is the man who you discipline, O Lord, and whom you teach out of your law. And you want to just call out, hang on, they're the bad guys. Why are you disciplining me? Why am I having this happen? But he starts that verse off by saying, because it's he, you are the one he's blessing. When I thought, in verses 18, 19, when I thought my foot slips, your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up. When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul. I may not ever understand all of God's plan, but I look to him as king and I follow him. Life is hard. There are going to be many questions that come up, but it doesn't mean that I stop following him. I still keep looking to him. I worship him. And I look to him for mercy. This is about being careful in my walk, seeing him as king. Taking the opportunities to refocus my eyes, not on what's going on around, not on myself, not even on my own struggles, but on the God who wins victory, on the king and following the king. Today is a day to focus, knowing who is God, who I am, putting God and myself in context. And that I discovered that he is more powerful than I may have ever realized in the past. That he is taking life somewhere. And these folks on this journey are singing this song to build up their own soul and to build up the souls of everybody else who's on this journey. To remind each other, hey, I'm going to keep my eyes on Jesus. So we're going to do something a little bit different to finish off our service in just a moment. The worship team's going to come up, and we're actually going to sing the benediction. And so as soon as the song's done, our service will be done. But just before they come, or even start coming up, I'm going to just pray. And after the service, you need to stay and pray. Please do. The Sunday school kids might be coming around with some things for the mothers, but we can be interrupted getting this. You can still stay and pray. Father, be with us today. Keep our eyes focused on Jesus, the one who has done so much in our lives, the author and perfecter of our faith. Send us from here knowing that you are truly the God at work in our lives. I pray this in the name of Jesus.